talking to Cornelius, Conversation 4. The prison in Downpatrick, where you were held for your trial in October 1843, doesn't exist anymore. The only remnant of your place of incarceration is an imposing gatehouse and some external walls. The space inside those walls is now occupied by a grammar school. Some of the students are the same age you were when you were waiting to hear your fate. 17 and on the brink of adult life. 17 and on the brink of a sentence of 7 years transportation for stealing clothes from a man in Ballynafae. I look at pictures of Downpatrick. It seems the most concentratedly Irish location that could be conjured into existence. I think of you standing beside your pimply brother in that courthouse, just a short distance from the place where old Saints Patrick and Bridget and Columba are said to be buried. The place's history extends further than the Christian era, possibly as far back as Neolithic times, certainly the Bronze Age. There's so much history, it presses up in lumpy hills. But I'm not sure you would have caught even the briefest glimpse of any of it. I presume you were brought down from Belfast in a well-guarded closed carriage, and then the shackled walk from the Hilltop County Jail to the courthouse below was probably through a tunnel. In sensory terms, you were separated from the greater world of Ireland long before you were marched onto a ship. After conviction, you were sent to the Smithfield convict depot in Dublin. It had been a general prison for men and women up until the late 1830s. There was a great celebration among members of the temperance movement when the prison closed. They saw that closure as a sign that Ireland was finally sobering up, and that fewer prisons would be needed as a consequence. But Smithfield wasn't closed for long. It was soon remodelled as a convict depot, a prison where men sentenced to transportation were gathered to wait until their ship arrived. The rebranded and remodelled Smithfield depot opened for business on the 1st of October 1843, just in time for your arrival. An 1847 report by the Inspectors General of Prisons in Ireland painted a quite bleak picture of Smithfield Depot. The situation of the prison is unhealthy in one of the very worst districts of the city, in a great measure abutting on the habitations of the least respectable part of the population, ready at any time to assist an escape or protect the fugitive, while it is surrounded on every side by cattle yards, with dung heaps piled high against the very wall of the prison. I mean the back walls of the building itself, for there is not even an insulating passage or boundary wall. The convicts of necessity sleep 3 or 4 in each cell, and are crowded together in the daytime when at work. They are, indeed, kept constantly employed, and the schoolmaster devotes a great deal of attention to the younger prisoners, but although a very great quantity of work is done in making the shoes and prison clothing, and many are kept employed in making mats, for which an advantageous sale can be had, still, with all the benefits to be derived from ceaseless supervision, I cannot but hope that measures may be taken which will enable the government to adopt some other system with the convicts, being, as I am, painfully sensible that whatever pains we may take both in procuring employment and enforcing strict superintendence, that anything in the way of radical reformation must be utterly hopeless while such members are in constant and inevitable association. This is where you spent the last 9 months of your life in Ireland, an overcrowded convict depot at the arse end of Dublin that was literally surrounded by bullshit. The Inspectors General paint a quite industrious picture of the place, with prisoners busy extracting fibres from coconut shells, weaving mats and prison mattresses, making leather, convict shoes and clothing, carrying timber work and maintenance and sock knitting and net making. Meanwhile, younger boys were busy learning their alphabet, early spelling, early reading, advanced reading, writing, and simple rules of arithmetic, and something simply recorded as the rule of 3. I can only presume the diet in 1843 was comparable to the one recorded in the Inspector's General Report of 1847. Breakfast every day was milk mixed with equal portions of rice and oatmeal, making a dish called stir-about. Dinner was bread and milk, except on Sundays when it was boiled beef, rice, vegetables, making a stew with a side serve of bread. Supper every evening was bread and milk. By our standard, it's a bland, unbalanced diet, but by the general standards of your times, it was pretty close to the community norm. There is an alternate portrait of life in Smithfield that falls short of the industrious picture painted by the inspectors. In 1852, the Lieutenant Governor of Van Diemen's Land, William Dennison, was having trouble with recently arrived Irish convicts, who he described as incorrigibly idle. Convicts were interviewed and shared their experiences of the Irish prison system. John Hogan, a shoemaker turned burglar from Cork, said the following about his time in Smithfield. After leaving Cork, I was removed to Smithfield Penitentiary, Dublin. The prisoners who were mechanics were paid for their work. They could do as little or as much as they pleased. There was no task work. I never heard of such a thing until I arrived in Van Diemen's Land. Even the quar pickers, who could pick as little or as much as they felt disposed, were allowed a gratuity in the way of snuff. I was 2 years in Smithfield. The discipline was not strict. If a prisoner was not a mechanic, he might just pick a handful in the day. There was no one to look after the quantity of work done. Religious services were performed by the clergymen of the different denominations on Wednesdays and Sundays. The prisoners attended school 1 hour during the day from 10 to 11. The prisoners slept in the men's side, 3 in a cell, in the boys' side, 5. They generally slept together. There were no lights in the cells. No noise was allowed to be made after 9 o'clock, but no restraint was placed on the prisoners conversing together during the day and up to that hour. The bedding was very bad and filthy. The 2 different portraits allow some impression of your 9 months in Dublin. You might have picked up some further reading skills in the classroom. Your record mentioned that you could read. Your background as a flax dresser certainly set you up well for the fibre work. Maybe you kept busy to keep sane. I think it's safe to say you spent plenty of time wondering what lay ahead, maybe with some positive measure of anticipation, maybe with some heavy moments of dread.